Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at how we can do some basic, answer some student questions about how we can use SQL to do problem solving. So the first question we have is, what is an SQL stub again? So a stub again is when we have a valid query with a valid column and a valid table we're working with. So we can see a stub right here. I have select zip.state from zip code zip. And so the key component part is that we actually, when we do this, we have a valid field that we can actually work in. So when I run this, it'll give me a compiled answer. It'll actually work. And I run that right there. Oh, good. I've got 227 rows selected from that. So it's not the correct answer, but it's a valid one. You can make a better stub by understanding more concepts. Again, when you're taking a look at the actual SQL assignment, by reading the question and looking at the expected results, that's a great way to identify what a valid column and table would be to actually do that. Take a look at the SQL problem breakdown video so you can do some more practice with that. Our next question is, how can I use the count function again? We have a couple different ways we can use the count function in class. The count function just by itself is just going to give us the basic count of the number of rows inside that table. So we saw earlier that on select zip.state from zip code zip, we had 227 rows. So I just run select count as number of zip codes. I hit play on that, and we have 227 zip codes total in that database. So it just gives us the count of the actual thing. However, if I take this and use something more with it, say for example the zips and states, I get the count of the number of groups for that value. In this case, I'll get how many zip codes we have per state inside that table. So I'll run that query right here, and you can see, oh, I've got 10 rows selected, and I've got New York's got 123 zip codes. Georgia's only got 1. Jersey, they've got 74. And we've got 19 over in Connecticut and 1 in Florida. 1 only zip code in Florida. I don't think that's quite correct, but hey, that's all good. And so by using that with once more filling on that, we can see that we can actually get more information by combining count with something else. So we can get the number of things in that group so we can actually understand better about what we're doing. So the next question we had is, what are the maximum tables you can get in SQL? Well, the answer is none. There is no limit. So we're going to take advantage of Katie from Mean Girls and the answer is that limit does not exist, because you can keep joining tables as long as you have connections between them. You can keep on joining them over and over again. What is the join the most thing you use often in role database jobs? Probably. It's one of the most common things you'll actually do is to use a join clause, because most of the time that you're looking at questions inside a database, the answer is not just this one over here or that one over there. It's combining this plus this plus this plus those. And you can actually combine those pieces of information together to actually get a correct answer. And so join is probably the most common part of working with a database in the real world. How do we limit the answers in a join? So we're going to go ahead and squish these down right here. Get those stubs out of the way. And so we have the join with an incorrect clause right here. So if I just run an incorrect join right here, so I have select enr.sectionid and gra.studentid from enrollment enr, joining grade gra. On the incomplete clause right here, I'm going to work with this where I'm going to say just join on the section ID matches on that. So I'm going to run this query right here, and I run that select query, and I get this huge amount. Only 5,000 rows are currently supported in script results. Just the first 5,000 rows are selected. We accidentally just did a Cartesian product. Sad face, major bad, because we don't want to ever actually do Cartesian products, because that multiplies the number of rows based on the product of the two columns or two tables we're working with. We don't want that. Instead, when we want to actually, the first way we limit the results is having the correct join on sequence. So because we have a composite primary key on both grade and enrollment, we want to make sure they have the full composite key selected. And so the correct on that, we notice we have the ENR section ID with section ID and the ENR student ID with the grade student ID. So we're in that same clause right here, that same query, just with the correct on clause instead. And we have that right now, and I'm down to 2,004 rows selected. Oh my gosh, it's so much nicer. So I don't have duplicate data happening. And so the first way to restrict results, of course, is to have a correct on clause. And then if we want to do any further reductions, of course, we can use a where or having clause to properly operate on the results of either identifying individual rows of data with where, or by using aggregate functions inside that having clause. We can limit those results down as further. Can you rename sections using the as clause? No, we just rename a table by the space and the rename section right there for that alias. That's all we have to do for that. How exactly do format masks work? So when we're talking about format masks, it's just a pattern matching thing with strings. And so we have an example right here. I'm using toChar some date field, passing it MMMI, and that's going to be the month and the minute from that date time. So it's going to give me that and turn it as a string. Or I have my to date right here. I have 12/34/01/01/00000, and I'm converting that on hour base 24 minutes, then days, months, and years. So it'll be the state time of 01/01/2000, not 2000. Oh, caught myself there. At 34 minutes past midnight that day. And so that's what's creating a value for that time frame right there. And we've got some demo videos on how to use dates to do more with that as well. So take a look at the channel for other demo videos on how to use dates for that. How do you make an average of values inside a table in SQL? So I have this really helpful average right here. So I have this average student ID is also helpful. In this case, I'm going to do section ID, the same approach right here. So I'm going to do select average of enrollment section ID as average section, passing enrollment NR for that, and I run that right here. And the average section ID, lol, is 116.070796. Great stuff. It's really helpful, useful information. But if we're just putting it in how to do a function right there, that's just a quick way we can demo how to do that. The next question students were asking is, how much does the formatting of the code matter? Does the syntax affect how it runs, or does it just matter of human readability? Is there something between a single line statement versus using multi-line statements? And again, human readability is the key. Now, I'm going to come out a little bit on this. I'm going to say I'm really lazy. I don't want to do extra reading on this. When I'm trying to troubleshoot your code, it makes it so much faster to identify errors in your code when it's separated by line for the different components we're looking at. So that's a big reason for that. It also makes it easier to debug, which is really critical for you when you're trying to solve your problems, because it gives you the error message on that line. So that's something you really want to make sure you're practicing with on that. So the next question we have was, can we go over the difference between aggregate functions and regular functions? And so we have a standard function versus an aggregate function. This is a really helpful demo right here. So I'm going to select the length of the student first name as a name length, and average as the student ID as average ID value from students to grouping by that first name value. So I'm going to grab that component right here, select that query, clear this out so we can see a nice bunch of results, hit play again, and now I've got the name length and average ID value. So I have 205 rows because there's 205 unique names inside that, and this name length has 5 and its average ID value is 399. This name length, whatever it happened to be, has 5 and it has an average value of 339. Oh, okay, cool. And so I could actually get those actual names in there, but I'm just using this to show like, oh, I can actually combine those functions together to see what's inside that. And so that's what we're looking at. So that's how it works. So again, when you're talking about the function right here, the length itself gives the individual value if you're talking about for that individual row, versus the average is the group of those those values, and then calculated based on that. So I'm calculating the average student ID for all those values for that unique name right there. So in this case, 399, 339, 199.5, whatever that happens to be. Assuming a date and a time holds a date time, how do you get only the time without deleting date? Well, you actually won't delete the date. You're just extracting that component out of it. And so you write your toChar command to extract only the time information using the correct format mask. And this is where you want to practice using format masks. Again, watch the demo video on how to use format masks. I've got a whole series of information on how to practice with that. If you don't, when you're creating a date, if you don't actually specify the actual date, you'll just get the current sys date on that. So keep that in mind when you're actually working on the toDate function as well. Why would you need to join a table to itself? Well, if you say, for example, you have a prerequisite class, because a class is a class, and that prerequisite is another class, you have to refer back to it. So you have to keep that in mind as you actually go through that. What are some of the different types of joins in SQL? You have the inner join, which is standard, so we don't use the actual keyword. An outer join is there, it's kind of special, we'll talk about in SQL 9. There's also cross join, very rare, we don't touch it. And then there's, of course, the natural join, which we don't use because names are bad. We can't guarantee what people name their code, so we're not going to worry about that. The next one we have is, what is Subster doing in this code? And so we have a whole bunch of code right here, so let's pull that up, and this is the code they selected for us. And so we have rpad of instructor, Subster, first name 11, and then last name 25, and then phone and Subster 13, 43, and 7. And so what we're doing in this case is Subster is the substring command, and so in this first one right here, first name, it's going at starting at index 1, the first letter going for 1 letter. This Subster starts at index 1 and goes for 3 letters. This substring starts at index 4, goes for 3 letters. This substring starts at index 7 and continues on to the very end. So as I run this query right here, and I grab that information, hit play, I've got all those instructors, and it's got their initial, their name, and then their phone number constructed, so it has that information spelled out for that. And that's what substring is doing in that case. Sometimes I get ambiguous column errors, even though these are a good alias. So make sure you have the same alias, because the fact we have on many of these things, we have the same student ID is in there a bunch of times. You want to make sure you actually specify the correct student ID. Don't do just student ID. Make sure you're using either stu.student ID or enrollment.student ID, maybe depending on what one you're actually trying to calculate that information for. That's what that's asking you to do, is actually make sure you calculate the correct student ID, because it doesn't know what it has. You have to use that dot specification, so you have to use stu dot to make sure you're talking about the right value when you're calculating functions based on it, or you'll get that ambiguous column error. Can you join stuff from different databases saved on the same server? Provided you have access, take a look at your DCL. We don't have any access to anything else in our current class right now, but you could actually do that when you practice making your actual queries between other information and we make our own practice database. Then yes, you could run a query that would join those table information from it, provided of course you have matching values in the appropriate columns. So you could definitely make that happen. What happens if you don't share the correct keys? You saw that $5,000 result, not 5,000 result. You saw that 5,000 row result, which is really not what we want to see. So you make sure you have that right there. How do you join tables with more than one? You get a multi-join on sequence, so each table gets the appropriate join and on clause. We go from there. Why do we have a standard to capitalize all the keywords? Well, we capitalize all the keywords, make it easier for humans to read. Capital keywords makes our eyes bring up and look at it. And the snake case right there tells us, oh, this is a field or a table name, so I can know what I'm looking at right there. We're trying to make this so it's easier for us humans to read. The computer really doesn't care, and looking at you, Python, we have a better way to read our code when we have indentation and clear names on that, so we keep that right there. Is there a way to do this without using 3 join on clauses? Yes, but with bad codes, we're not going to do it, so too bad, so sad. And that's all we have to worry about for today. I hope this is a helpful review of some ways to work with joins and do some practice queries. Take a look at some of the other videos and how you can do some stuff. Cheers, we'll see you next time, and have a great day. Bye-bye.